It was the evening of July 4th, 2015, a warm summer night in the quiet town of Riverwood, Indiana. Fireworks lit the skies in bursts of red, white, and blue. Music played on every street corner, and families gathered for the annual Independence Day celebration. At the heart of the festivities stood Riverwood Park Amusement Center, buzzing with life. Laughter echoed through the rides, and the scent of cotton candy mixed with popcorn filled the air. Among the crowd was Josh Harper, a 25-year-old mechanic with a kind smile, a bit of wild brown hair, and a gentle presence. He had come to the park with three of his closest friends, Sam, Chris, and Noah. It was supposed to be a simple, fun night: rides, junk food, and maybe, just maybe, a conversation with the girl Josh had admired from afar, who worked the lemonade stand near the Ferris wheel. They arrived at 8 p.m. Everything felt normal. Around 9 p.m., while passing the dark water slide, an old, partially closed water ride, Josh told his friends he'd be right back. "Gonna grab a drink," he said, gesturing toward a nearby refreshment kiosk. "Meet me by the big wheel." He never came back. At first, they waited. 10 minutes, then 20. They walked around, assuming he might have run into someone or taken a call. But as the minutes turned into an hour and his phone went straight to voicemail, unease crept in. They asked around: ride operators, food vendors, even a janitor. No one had seen Josh. By midnight, the park closed. Everyone exited, but not Josh. The three friends sat on the curb outside the main gate, staring at the emptying lot. Sam hesitated, then said, "I'm going to his mom's. She needs to know." It was 3 a.m. when Margaret Harper walked into the Riverwood Police Department, her hands shaking, her voice trembling. She wasn't the kind of mother who panicked easily, but this was different. Josh wasn't answering his phone. Josh never stayed out all night without a call. Josh was gone. At the front desk stood Detective Dennis Crowley, a seasoned officer in his late 40s. He had seen dozens of missing persons reports, most of them resolved within hours. But something in Margaret's eyes gave him pause. She wasn't guessing. She knew something was wrong. "My son went to the amusement park tonight," she said. "He didn't come home. He's not answering. This isn't like him. Something happened." Detective Crowley took the report seriously. He gathered details: clothing, height, age, habits. Then he made a call and requested the three friends, Sam, Chris, and Noah, to come to the station for questioning. By 5 a.m., all three sat in the cold interview room. Margaret waited in silence, her coffee untouched. Her eyes stared at the empty hallway, hoping Josh would suddenly appear at the door. The boys told their story again and again. Their timelines matched. Their tone was shaken but honest. Josh had simply walked off to buy a drink and never came back. At 6:30 a.m., Detective Crowley issued a field notice to begin searching the amusement park grounds. Officers arrived at Riverwood Park just before sunrise, walking the grounds before staff returned. They checked bathrooms, storage areas, first aid stations, even the trash bins. Nothing. That afternoon, Crowley reviewed the security footage from the main gates and pathways, and there it was. Josh Harper was seen entering the park at 8:02 p.m., but the cameras never captured him leaving. Not through the front gate, not through the staff exit, not anywhere. That evening, Crowley sat with Margaret in a quiet room and delivered the first official update. The cameras showed Josh entering the park, but he never came out. The next morning, posters flooded the town. "Have you seen Josh Harper?" His face appeared on telephone poles, restaurant doors. Local news. Margaret stood in front of reporters holding a picture of her son. Josh didn't run away. Josh didn't leave. Someone knows something, and I won't stop until I find him. But what no one knew then was that the answer to Josh's disappearance was still inside the park, and no one had looked deep enough. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And soon an entire year had passed since Josh Harper vanished from Riverwood Park. The search had gone cold. Detectives had interviewed every staff member, scanned every inch of the park with cadaver dogs, combed through nearby woods, rivers, tunnels, yet no trace. No phone activity, no credit card usage, nothing. It was as if Josh had been swallowed by the ground. The amusement park briefly shut down for internal investigation. Structural engineers checked ride mechanisms and drainage systems. But the final report read plainly, no evidence of foul play or suspicious activity found on premises. But Margaret Harper wasn't convinced. She knew her son. He didn't run away. He didn't vanish. He was somewhere, and she believed it was still inside that park. So she took matters into her own hands. Margaret launched a website, www.whereisjosh.org. It had one purpose, to keep his name alive. She posted his photos, shared updates, and created a secure form for anonymous tips. She spent her evenings scrolling through forum messages, analyzing aerial maps of the park, and visiting ex-employees for any overlooked detail. And then, one autumn morning, a message appeared on the site. He never left. Look below your feet. The message came from an anonymous IP, traced back to a public library. No name, no way to follow up. But to Margaret, it wasn't random. It was a lead. She took the message straight to Detective Crowley. He read it, then exhaled slowly. You get a lot of prank messages in missing persons cases, Margaret. This doesn't feel like a prank, she said. Crowley agreed to revisit the park with a small team. They focused near the old Darkwater slide, where Josh was last seen. They searched again. Flashlights, tools, floor panels, drainage access points. Still nothing. The team left with empty hands, and Crowley quietly filed the report. No new findings. But something else happened. Days later, the staff member who sent the tip, a man named Elliot Michaels, quit his job and left town. Margaret never heard from him again. But despite everything, Margaret refused to quit. She returned to the same bench every weekend near the ride where Josh vanished. She left flowers, flyers, and sometimes just sat in silence. She taped a photo of Josh to a post by the ride and wrote in marker, "If you're still here, I will find you." The town began to whisper again. Local news ran a story titled, "Does Riverwood Park hide a dark secret?" No one could answer. But Margaret was certain of one thing. She wasn't chasing shadows. She was chasing a truth that everyone else had missed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. And soon, an entire year had passed since Josh Harper vanished from Riverwood Park. The search had gone cold. Detectives had interviewed every staff member, scanned every inch of the park with cadaver dogs, combed through nearby woods, rivers, tunnels, and yet no trace. No phone activity, no credit card usage, nothing. It was as if Josh had been swallowed by the ground. The amusement park briefly shut down for internal investigation. Structural engineers checked ride mechanisms and drainage systems. But the final report read plainly, quote, "No evidence of foul play or suspicious activity found on premises," end quote. But Margaret Harper wasn't convinced. She knew her son. He didn't run away. He didn't vanish. He was somewhere, and she believed it was still inside that park. She took matters into her own hands. Margaret launched a website, www.whereisjosh.org. It had one purpose: to keep his name alive. She posted his photos, shared updates, and created a secure form for anonymous tips. She spent her evenings scrolling through forum messages, analyzing aerial maps of the park, and visiting ex-employees for any overlooked detail. And then, one autumn morning, a message appeared on the site. Quote, "He never left. Look below your feet." End quote. The message came from an anonymous IP traced back to a public library. No name, no way to follow up. But to Margaret, it wasn't random. It was a lead. She took the message straight to Detective Crowley. He read it, then exhaled slowly. "You get a lot of prank messages in missing persons cases, Margaret." She said, "This doesn't feel like a prank." Crowley agreed to revisit the park with a small team. They focused near the old Darkwater slide where Josh was last seen. They searched again. Flashlights, tools, floor panels, drain access points. Still nothing. The team left with empty hands, and Crowley quietly filed the report. No new findings. But something else happened. Days later, the staff member who sent the tip, a man named Elliot Michaels, quit his job and left town. Margaret never heard from him again. Despite everything, Margaret refused to quit. She returned to the same bench every weekend near the ride where Josh vanished. She left flowers, flyers, and sometimes just sat in silence. She taped a photo of Josh to a post by the ride and wrote in marker, quote, "If you're still here, I will find you." End quote. The town began to whisper again. Local news ran a story titled, "Does Riverwood Park Hide a Dark Secret?" No one could answer, but Margaret was certain of one thing. She wasn't chasing shadows. She was chasing a truth that everyone else had missed.
By 2018, the town of Riverwood had quietly moved on. People stopped talking about Josh Harper. His missing posters had faded under rain and sun. Children now played on the same park grounds where he vanished, unaware of the shadow that still lingered beneath their feet. But Margaret Harper had not moved on. She remained relentless, still visiting the park, still handing out flyers, still asking the same questions. And one day, someone answered. His name was Elliot Michaels, a former maintenance worker at Riverwood Park. He had worked there for 3 years, including the summer Josh disappeared. Margaret found him at a hardware store on the edge of town. He hesitated when he saw her, guilt in his eyes. "You knew him," Margaret said softly. He looked around and nodded. "There's something I never told the police," he whispered. "The night Josh vanished, I heard a sound." Margaret's heart nearly stopped. "What kind of sound?" "Like someone calling. Muffled. From underneath the slide, the Darkwater slide. I was doing a routine check. I thought it was just pipe pressure noises. But then I heard it again. It was faint, like someone banging on metal. I told management." "What did they say?" she asked. "They told me not to bring it up again." Elliot agreed to give a statement to the police. Detective Dennis Crowley met with him. Though cautious, he filed the tip and organized a targeted sweep around the waterslide. A new team of technicians examined the pipes, checked the foundations, even opened storm drains. Nothing. The official report noted, "No evidence found to confirm auditory claims. Area structurally sound." Days later, Elliot Michaels vanished. He quit his job. His phone was disconnected. He moved out of state without a word. No one heard from him again. Margaret was devastated, but not defeated. She took the story to the local media. She gave interviews, holding Elliot's statement and Josh's photos side by side. He didn't leave the park. Someone knows something, and the park has never been fully searched. A local newspaper printed a bold headline that Sunday. Is Riverwood Park hiding a dark past? For the first time in years, the public started paying attention again. Bloggers, reporters, and online sleuths began digging into the park's history. Old schematics were posted online. Maps of the original underground maintenance tunnels were leaked. One thing became clear. The park had sections underground that had never been investigated. Sections no one wanted to talk about. End of chapter. For the first time in years, Margaret wasn't alone. A forgotten tip, a vanishing employee, a sound in the dark. The story was waking up again, and it was only beginning to speak.
By early 2023, Riverwood Park was a relic of the past. The rides had rusted, the gates were chained shut. After years of declining visitors and controversy, the park was finally sold to a private investment group aiming to rebuild it into a modern attraction. They called it New Riverwood. Renovations began that February, with teams of engineers and contractors working daily to clear out debris, replace old structures, and overhaul the park's failing infrastructure. Then, something unexpected happened. One April morning, a crew working in the old drainage system discovered a sealed metal gate behind a forgotten water storage tank near the dark water slide, the very ride where Josh Harper had last been seen. The gate wasn't on any current blueprints. Rust covered the hinges. The bolts looked untouched in decades. Curious and concerned, the workers stopped the operation and immediately contacted local authorities. Detective Dennis Crowley, now semi-retired but still emotionally attached to the Harper case, came back for the first time in years. He ordered the area secured and called for a forensic team. It took nearly 3 hours to force the gate open. What they found behind it changed everything. It was a narrow concrete tunnel, damp and cold, built with old materials not used since the 1970s. The tunnel led to a small, hidden chamber, just large enough to crouch inside. Inside that room, they found a brown leather bag, an old smartphone, cracked but intact, a journal, leather-bound and worn. Detective Crowley recognized the name stamped on the bag immediately. He said, "Josh Harper." The air left the room. He called Margaret, who arrived within the hour. When she saw her son's belongings, she dropped to her knees, holding the bag tightly, tears silently falling from her eyes. She whispered, "He was here. All these years, he was here." The journal was carefully opened by forensic specialists. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes. The writing matched Josh's, but what they found wasn't just personal notes. It was messages, strange symbols, fragmented thoughts, repeated phrases like, "I'm below," voices in the pipes, "There's a door behind the door," "Someone else was here before me." One line, written several times, 2008, that's where it started. This changed everything. Police reopened the case immediately. Crowley began cross-referencing old records, searching for anyone connected to the park in 2008. That's when they found a forgotten file. Garrett Weston, a maintenance worker who vanished without a trace in the summer of 2008. No report was filed. He was presumed to have quit. But a note in his HR file read, "Warning, stay out of the lower tunnels. Dangerous. Lock the doors permanently." Now everything was coming together. 2 disappearances, 15 years apart, both connected to the same forgotten underground space. The park wasn't just an amusement center. It was a puzzle, and someone, maybe long ago, had decided to keep certain doors closed for a reason. After 8 years of silence, the truth finally cracked through the concrete. The journal spoke, the walls whispered, and for the first time, people were listening. Spring turned to summer in Riverwood. The discovery of Josh Harper's bag and journal had reignited the investigation. Local news outlets swarmed the site. National media began picking up the story, calling it the Riverwood case, lost and found after 8 years. But behind the headlines, the work was just beginning. Detective Dennis Crowley, though older now, had never felt more alert. Every page of Josh's journal seemed to point to something bigger. It wasn't just a lost boy, it was a place, a space that had been sealed and buried with purpose. And someone, at some point, wanted it forgotten. By the fall of 2023, the entire town of Riverwood had its eyes turned underground. With new evidence, witness reports, and old city records now resurfaced, the case of Josh Harper was no longer just a local mystery. It had become a national conversation. News outlets called it the case the city tried to bury. But beneath all the media frenzy, the truth had already begun to take root. The underground tunnels, long forgotten, badly documented, and dangerously built, had been quietly sealed off by the city decades ago. One of them collapsed partially in 2008, leading to the unexplained disappearance of a maintenance worker, Garrett Weston. Now it was clear. Josh had somehow found his way into those tunnels, or worse, had been led into them, and no one ever checked far enough. The discovery of Josh's journal, his bag, and the hidden rooms beneath the park confirmed that he had been trapped but alive, at least for some time. His writings, though cryptic, suggested awareness, movement, and determination. The city issued a formal apology to the Harper family. The old park management was held legally accountable for negligence and destruction of internal reports. But Margaret Harper didn't want revenge. She wanted her son to be remembered. So she worked with the city to create something lasting. In October 2023, the newly renovated Riverwood Park reopened with a special section named the Josh Harper Memorial Garden. In the center stood a bronze statue, a young man holding an open journal, facing the sky, as if sending a message to the world. Below it, a plaque read, "For those who never stopped searching, for those who left a trace, even in silence." Inside the memorial garden was an interactive wall displaying scanned pages from Josh's actual journal. Visitors could read his notes, follow his sketches, and see the strength he showed, even in the darkest, most isolated place. Margaret visited every week. She would sit on a bench beside the statue, watching children play in the sunshine, knowing that the truth had finally been uncovered. Her son's story was no longer a question mark. It had become a voice, not one of disappearance, but of resilience. And even though not every answer was found, one thing was certain. Josh Harper was never forgotten. In the end, it wasn't the police who solved the case. It wasn't a headline or a lucky break. It was the voice of a mother and the words of a son that echoed loud enough to be heard, even from deep below.